Hello and welcome to this roundtable discussion being organized by the Wire Forum and Chao Phraya Dialogue with Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan, old friend to many of us in Delhi, former High Commissioner to Delhi, former High Commissioner to India, somebody with long and many years of experience with first-hand knowledge of India-Pakistan relations. You've also been Pakistan's ambassador to Afghanistan and you have a great deal of insight into what is happening there. We will use the time we have to discuss the current state of play between India and Pakistan and prospects for future engagement. We are, as all of you know, at a period of ebb in the bilateral relationship, and we will explore over the course of the next hour and a half in a conversation with His Excellency and by involving some of you in the audience through your questions with diagnosing the current problem with the relationship and what could be done to move things forward. By way of an introduction, my name is Siddharth Varadarajan, a founding editor of the Wire.in, and for viewers who are joining us through the live stream on YouTube, a very warm welcome. We are coming to you live from the Habitat Center in Delhi. Chao Phraya Dialogue is a name that you may not be that familiar with. This is the name of a Track 2 India-Pakistan discussion that has been through 21 editions, 21 sessions, going back over the last 4 or 5 years. Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan Sahab, in his capacity as the Karta Dharta of the Jinnah Foundation, honorary Vice President of the Jinnah Foundation in Islamabad, has been present in all of them. I've been fortunate enough to have attended, I dare say, more than half of those dialogues, along with other participants from India. And the Chao Phraya Dialogue has been a very unique and helpful window for engagement between Indians and Pakistanis at a time when the two governments have not found it possible to move the relationship forward. A lot of issues get discussed in the Track 2 at the Track 2 level that don't necessarily get an airing before a wider public. So we will use this occasion without, of course, breaking any of the confidentialities of our Track 2 discussions to also try to bring out some of those perspectives, some of those views, and some of those possibilities for moving the relationship forward. If we take a long view of India-Pakistan relations over the last 10 years, but I say over the last 2.5 years in particular, since May 2014, it's been a real roller coaster ride of potential, of promise, of initiatives being taken by the leaders of both countries, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India and Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Pakistan. They've had multiple meetings at various fora on various occasions. A plan of action appears tantalizingly before us on the table, only to then vanish. A roadmap of sorts was created by the two principals when they met at UFA on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, only to not be implemented a few months later when it came for the two national security advisors to meet. There have been other occasions, other false starts that have been compromised by acts of terror, which have vitiated the atmosphere and made it impossible for the bilateral relationship to proceed. In reality, even though it is tempting to confine our initial glance to the last 2.5 years, the bilateral relationship has not been moving forward at all since 26/11. So 2008 in many ways is a crucial watershed, which marked this period of stagnation, this period of, dare I say, even a downward turn in the relationship. And even though both under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and under Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, as I said, attempts were made, these haven't really managed to move things forward. As of today, the Government of India has reiterated its stand in on the record, off the record, in a variety of places and occasions, to say, broadly speaking, that talks and terror cannot go hand in hand. A new element of tension in the bilateral relationship has been added not just by the attacks in Pathankot or Uri, but by the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor plans of Pakistan and China, which will go through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, a region that Pakistan used to call northern areas, now Gilgit-Baltistan. India has objected to the Chinese and the Pakistanis about this project. A new element may be in the offing, a new element of tension may be in the offing. There was a statement by a Pakistani minister to GeoTV a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday, that Pakistan is seriously considering incorporating Gilgit-Baltistan as the 5th province of the country. These plans have been announced from time to time in the past. If this goes ahead, this would be a new complication in the bilateral relationship. Of course, other factors that have come on the table over the last year in particular, Pakistan has seen a peaceful transition, for want of a better term, from one army chief who finished his term and went out into retirement, and General Bajwa coming in as a new army chief. This has occasioned, this transfer of power, as it were, within the military, has occasioned a lot of commentary on the Pakistani side by many commentators whose opinion one trusts, that this marks in some ways a new beginning as far as the civil-military relationship in Pakistan is concerned. Pakistan is preoccupied with dealing with all kinds of terrorist groups that are operating on its territory. The recent incidents at Sevan, for example, have occasioned fresh soul searching in Pakistan on the threat that terrorist groups pose to Pakistan and its political future. This is also, in a way, a new element in the internal configuration of power and priorities in Pakistan, and has a bearing on the bilateral relationship. And during my interactions over the last couple of Chao-Phraya dialogues, it has been clear to me and to many of the Indian interlocutors that many Pakistani analysts had hoped that perhaps with the Uttar Pradesh and other state elections that have just concluded, a new climate may be created where the Modi government may once again want to pick up the threads of engagement with Pakistan. This, ladies and gentlemen, constitutes the broad terrain of where we've been over the past 2.5 years. And I want to kick off this discussion by really asking Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan Sahab for his initial assessment of the prospects for the relationship against the backdrop of all that has happened, of course, since 26/11, but in particular over the last 2.5 years. Do you think that India and Pakistan have it in them to pick up the threads of engagement, or are we looking at a continuing situation of no official contact, perhaps even a deterioration in the face of violent incidents which can and will happen, which will further complicate things? So I would like to essentially ask you to give us your initial assessments.
Thank you, Siddharth. It's always a pleasure to visit Delhi and interact with old friends, and I have a lot of fond memories going back to over 30 years of having, being in Delhi. My first assignment here was in 1985 when I came as Deputy Chief of Mission, and Dr. Humayun Khan was ambassador here. And since then, and really you have talked about the last 2.5 years. I would like to just say something that I've said a long time ago. When I came here at that particular time, things had started looking up. This was the period of Ziaul, when Ziaul Haq stopped over for a brief visit here when meeting Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi on return from Male. And we picked up a dialogue process at that time, and it had generated a lot of hope and all that. And Dr. Humayun Khan had asked me about what did I, as a newcomer into here in the region, what did I think of the whole India-Pakistan relation prospects. And I used two expressions which was really scoffed at by him, but I think they have ultimately proved to be true. One, I had said that India-Pakistan relations are like Tarburi relations. Tarburi in Pashto, I'm a Pashtun myself, so in Pashto, Tarburi is your first cousin from the father's side. It's as close as a brother, and you are also deadly enemies with each other because land gets divided and you are claiming each other's land. So I said this is going to be a Tarburi relationship, and I said your efforts to improve relations are going to be Sisyphean efforts. And I think I probably said that unthinkingly totally because I was new to the region, but I think looking back at the last 32 years, I think that is precisely what has happened. We are close, but yet very far and likely to remain that way as far as things are today. I hope they change. I have always fervently hoped that they change, but the way things are, and today I find them even more difficult because a new factor has come in, and that is the factor of terrorism. And as far as if I was a terrorist, my first thing would be, particularly now that the Pakistani government and Pakistani military has taken very serious action against terrorists of all sorts and all hues. And this action started since 2004. People don't believe it, but I was here at that time. I was High Commissioner here, and I know that President Musharraf meant it when he said that, when he gave that undertaking. And since then, we have very strictly adhered to that. People still have doubts about that, but that is the very fact, at least in my interactions, and I've had interactions at all levels. But that is going to be a very long, drawn-out battle. And when the military is concentrating on the terrorists and thrashing them practically, they have been evicted from FATA areas completely. Those areas have been cleared, and now with the new offensive that has been Raddul Fasad that has been taken for in the urban areas as well, they are feeling the pressure on them. And the easiest way for them to relieve of that pressure is to do something silly here in India, so that suddenly relations between India and Pakistan become deteriorated, and there is some kind of a military challenge from here, and then the army would have to respond, and that would divert their attention from the concentrated actions that they are taking. So making that contingent upon action against terrorism is not a good idea in that sense of the word. Yes, the two countries need to cooperate with each other to eliminate terror, to fight terror together, and this is something that I had always felt. And we had started, if you recall, in 2006 some kind of a mechanism which I was not particularly happy with. I thought it will not work at all, and it hasn't worked at all. But I think that the two countries need to decide at what level they need to cooperate as far as fighting terror is concerned, and keep it, with due respect to the media, keep it totally quiet and totally quiet and not in the glare of any kind of publicity. Giving statements that this has happened there and this has happened there only encourages the terrorists. So we need to cooperate there. Having said that, I feel that we have had opportunities to start the process. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I can tell you with categoric assurance that across the board in Pakistan, all the political parties in Pakistan are totally agreed on improving relations with India. There's not a single political party which opposes improving relations with India. You may have noticed that both in the 2013 elections and the earlier elections, 2008 elections, India was not mentioned at all in the election campaigning. There was no India bashing at all. And in fact, to the extent that if at all somebody talked about it, they talked about improving relations with India. And there was no objection to that. As far as the military is concerned, again, whatever little interaction I have had with them, they are also of the view that we should move forward and we should improve relations with India, relations in an honorable and dignified manner. So it is a great opportunity for India to move forward. There have been reservations here. I can understand their reservation about saying that terror and talks can't go together. True, but then terrorist gets the signal that, all right, if I want to stop talks, I just have to do something little, and India will get angry again, and the whole process will be derailed. So you have the people and government here have to make the choice whether they are willing to take that, you sort of bite the bit and say, okay, all right, whatever may happen, we will talk. We will continue with the dialogue process. If you recall, in 2005, when President Musharraf visited here, the joint statement specifically mentioned that the acts of terrorism would not be allowed. I don't know the exact wording, but something to that effect, that acts of terrorism would not be allowed to derail the peace process. That is the kind of attitude we have to adopt. And for that, we need to develop an understanding. How can India be satisfied that Pakistan sincerely means that? We need, again, it is something that should not be spoken through speeches and statements and so on, but through quiet interaction. Part of diplomacy is of doing things quietly and see whether Pakistan is sincere in it or not. And I personally feel that even today there is tremendous opportunity where leadership in Pakistan wants to move forward, to the extent that you must have noticed that recent visit to Turkey. I think Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, when he was asked about relations with India, he talked about improving relations with India. And in fact, in all the talk shows in Pakistan, he was bitterly criticized for that India is not wanting to talk to us. Why the hell does he keep repeating that we should talk to India? But that just shows that the leadership in Pakistan wants to move forward. We will understand your misgivings, but the only way that we can sit together and clear those misgivings is when we have interaction on all the subjects. And also, there are lots of areas where we have had good success. I mean, if you look back at all the dialogue process, starting from '86, it got disrupted, then again it got started in 2004, it got disrupted again. If you look at all the achievements during this block of 30-year period, there are lots of things we have agreed to. Non-attack on nuclear installations have been one of the things. I was Joint Secretary in the Ministry when we negotiated that. We are still adhering to that. On the 1st of January, whatever the state of relationship, those lists are exchanged. So if that can be done. Similarly, the notification about nuclear accidents, then all the CBMs, Kashmir-related CBMs that we have taken about cross-LOC trade, about the bus services, and there are several others. We were talking about a formula to reach a certain kind of a long-term CBM where an understanding can be reached on Kashmir, and people can be, satisfied that something is happening, and so the Kashmiris will have some kind of a solace that okay, the two countries are talking about finding some kind of a solution where they can draw comfort, and the stress and distress that they suffer is removed. Now, how do we go about it? I think if you look back at the entire period and see all the positives that we have achieved, I think it's a very encouraging picture, and it will give us a very good start if we were to start tomorrow.
Okay. One of the issues you raised is the position from the Indian side that talks and terror can't go hand in hand, and as you said, the signal that this sends to terrorist groups that they effectively have veto power over the bilateral relationship. Now, from the Indian point of view, the response to that would be that the kind of open-ended commitment which Manmohan Singh made, I think maybe it was in Sharm el-Sheikh actually.
It was in Delhi.
But there was, I do recall this formulation of
it was in Delhi.
Not allowing terrorists to dictate or to interrupt the process. It wasn't quite a formulation of the kind that Mani Shankar Iyer advocates of uninterrupted, uninterruptible, and so on.
His is better. I think that's a
but the critics of Manmohan Singh at the time, and that would be a position that the BJP would take today, the BJP government would take today, is that as long as there are sections of policymakers in Pakistan, sections of the Pakistani establishment that regard anti-India terrorist groups as proxies and as sort of a useful form of putting military pressure on India that is below the radar, as it were. So committing to talking regardless of terror, in a way, gives a green light to those sections to continue to stage provocations, continue to sponsor terrorist groups or to back them or to encourage their infiltration, finds an echo, or this suspicion gets strengthened when we look at the fate, say, of the 2611 trial. Pakistan began actually, and I've seen some of the writings of the FIA chief at that time who investigated 2611, and they, Pakistanis investigators got a lot of evidence of involvement of Pakistani organizations, Lashkar-e-Taiba, some of these individuals, and but the trial itself never went very far. It got stuck on on procedural grounds, And as far as Pakistan's own war against terror is concerned, you mentioned Radul Fasad or Zarb-e Azab and so on. So Pakistan has shown much greater willingness to launch attacks and to counter TTP, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, all these anti-Pakistani groups, but has been not so forthcoming in terms of action against the LET and its new avatars or the Jaish-e-Mohammed, except when, as in the case of Masood Azhar, when he actually was involved in an assassination plot against Musharraf. But so the Indian side would say, look, yes, we shouldn't be giving terrorists veto power, but what we want to see from the Pakistani side is much greater effort. And what can Pakistan do to assure India that in fact it has turned its back on its old policy or on the policy of using terrorist groups to create trouble in India? I think that's where the problem lies.
I agree. The question is really, again, what should be the mechanism or what can be the mechanism through which this mutual suspicion. You see, Pakistan has a lot of suspicions about India's activity, and it doesn't go back now. India's activity, for example, in Balochistan, it's not for today. I remember when I was additional secretary in the ministry in 2000 and 2001, I was in charge of the area, Iran, Turkey, Central Asia. We officially took it up with the Iranian government that Indian Consulate General in Zahedan is inciting, fomenting trouble in Balochistan. We had clear-cut evidence what was happening there. We took it up officially with it. So this is a long story. You see, we have had the unfortunate tradition, and I'll be very frank and blunt. After retiring, one can be frank and blunt, that we both have pursued a policy where we try to take advantage of each other's discomfort. I think time has come where we need to sit together, and that is what I had been talking about even when I was High Commissioner here, that we need a mechanism at the intelligence level. And people scoffed at it, but I still firmly believe that at the highest intelligence level, a quiet back channel kind of a mechanism where the two, if India feels that this is the evidence available, quietly give it to them. There will be, if you say it publicly, an automatic reaction would be defensive. If we say something publicly about Balochistan or your involvement in FATA with the TTP and all that, you will immediately take a defensive position. But if we talk quietly that look, here is the evidence, examine it. If you think our evidence is wrong, we satisfy us, both for India and Pakistan. I think that dialogue is essential and important. As far as Hafiz Saeed's thing is concerned, you see, and the Mumbai attack trials are concerned, I remember when that attack happened. I had retired, I was in Islamabad, and I was talking to a lawyer friend of mine, and he says that, look, given the legal system, which both of us have are almost identical, he says, if I was engaged by Hafiz Saeed as a lawyer, which he wasn't, but he said, I would drag this case for years without any problem. And this is the unfortunate thing about evidence gathering and the lacuna in the laws that we have. I mean, look at Swami Asimanand. He talks about being involved in something and still he gets released. So there's something wrong in evidence gathering, there's something wrong about the prosecution process. But these are the laws. We have to keep at it. We have to keep trying hard and see that all those who are involved in terrorism should be punished. And I think as far as again, maybe I'm being very naive, but I personally feel that I noticed that in Pakistan, there is a very clear and sincere desire since 2004. And I've had long discussions with President Musharraf at that particular time on those, that yes, this kind of a thing has to come to a halt. And I think you have to try it out, but through this kind of statements, through doing, that okay, only this first and then other things, that would create difficulties.
You mentioned procedural difficulties, and I think that's a fair point. The answer to that, of course, would be that Pakistan has shown considerable flexibility, shall we say, in handling the cases of anti-Pakistani terrorists through the instrumentality of military courts. This is controversial in Pakistan. I know that human rights groups have objected, but with the brutality of each terrorist attack, the Army Public School and now 7, the public acceptability for military courts in Pakistan has increased, and the civilian government is quite happy to expand the ambit of those courts, and the army is very happy to do it. Could it be possible? Would it be possible at some stage, or perhaps even sooner, to cut through the procedural limbo of the Bombay trial, the 2611 trial, and say, fine, we have evidence here, we have created a new mechanism to deal with one set of terror suspects as a mark of Pakistani commitment to opposing these kinds of groups that are targeting India. Military courts could be used against Hafiz Saeed or Zakir Rahman Lakhvi.
Yeah, if they were to do anything stupid or horrible now, I'm sure that would be the case. But you can't take it retroactively. Whatever has happened, the cases are already going on. They are old cases. I still feel that if those, despite all the difficulties, if those cases are pursued actively, if the two sides interact with each other, talk to each other, and we have the same legal system, so we understand the same kind of lawyers who create same kind of spins to save their clients. But that has to be done very quietly. But once a case is already been under
that anti-terror, the Havana mechanism was spectacularly unsuccessful.
To be very honest with you, I was High Commissioner here, and when it was being proposed by India, because the two Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and President Musharraf were supposed to meet in Havana, and I was told that they want some kind of an outcome also of that meeting, and this was proposed. I called our Foreign Secretary and I said, India is going to propose this. Please accept it. It will not work. I don't like it, but don't say no. Accept it, because otherwise, if we don't accept it, India will say, look, they don't want to cooperate in terrorism. But from day one, I had felt that mechanism is not going to work. Additional secretaries in the foreign offices sitting there talking about terror and investigating terror and so on and so forth. No. My own idea, and at that particular time, I had sold that idea that alternatively, we should have a quiet interaction between the chiefs of RAW and IB on your side and chiefs of ISI and IB on our side, meeting quietly in back channel, discussing things. You fling the evidence in his face. I mean, when you are sitting quietly and you don't have to have any media or public to answer to or make a statement in parliament about it, then you can discuss it more frankly, and you cannot just hedge things. And that way, when both sides are determined that they are going to fight it, then I think we will be successful. And I think there's some kind of a mechanism has to be started with there.
You mentioned the Aziz Saab, the kind of criticism of Nawaz Sharif in the Pakistani media after his Istanbul comment. This was quite similar to the kind of flack he faced when he came for Modi Sahab swearing in May 2014, and I think also after UFA, when there was a great deal of consternation in Pakistan that the Pakistani side had agreed to a joint statement which didn't include a mention of Kashmir and so on and so forth. And even before Nawaz Sharif's plane touched back in Pakistan, the channels were aflame with negative commentary. This is something that we also see in this country. As a reporter, I was at Sharm el-Sheikh when
Balochistan was mentioned.
Gilani and Manmohan Singh met, and the joint statement had a reference to Balochistan. And there was, of course, a Pakistani reporter there who took great offense and criticized Gilani in front of all of us, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, that why have you allowed a mention of Balochistan to come in the joint statement? And he accused the Prime Minister of Pakistan of internationalizing Balochistan. Of course, the narrative played out very differently in India. And finally, Manmohan Singh had to walk back. But I'm mentioning all of this because even a politically confident Prime Minister like Narendra Modi, who has the greatest majority that any Prime Minister has enjoyed since Rajiv Gandhi, is not dependent on allies, has won one spectacular state victory after the other, and this position really is quite unchallenged. He can't also afford to ignore public perceptions, right? Now, from his point of view, he embarked upon a journey of great risk in December of 2015 when he went to Lahore, and there was a lot of surprise, also consternation on the part of opposition politicians here. A lot of that was reflected in the media, but what were murmurs of discomfort became loud vocal denunciations after the Pathankot attack. when people said, look, you went to Lahore and this is how terrorist groups and Pakistan have paid you back. Despite that, Modi created a framework whereby some kind of a joint investigation could happen, and it seemed as if the accident-prone nature of the bilateral relationship was going to turn a corner, and that despite Pathankot and despite the BJP's professed view that talks and terror can't go hand in hand, the government had kind of bitten the bullet and said, okay, we're going to give this effort, we're going to give this a chance. A Pakistani joint investigation team came to India. They were given access to the scene of the crime, as it were, despite the fact that it was a cantonment. That also occasioned negative criticism of Modi. The Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, for example, said, this is the betrayal of Indian national security and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, the government pursued that path, and sadly nothing came of it. The joint investigation never really went further. The Indian side said that, well, we are waiting to hear from the Pakistani side. The Pakistani side said, well, we've done all that we can do. And then, of course, other events happened which, have really caused a setback to the relationship. Do you think, looking back, I know that you're not in government, and so you're not privy to information that is not in the public domain, but as somebody well informed, exactly. Do you think that the handling of the post-Pathankot crisis and investigation on the Pakistani side might have been different? And had it been different, we could have avoided some of the terrible bumps that we've seen over the last 6 months?
As I said earlier also, I believe that there are certain aspects of investigations which need to be kept quiet. Otherwise, it becomes difficult. I don't think Pakistan has yet abandoned this thing that Indian team cannot come. It's just that we have stopped talking to each other. There has been no exchanges. I think if we start a process, I think India can take up that matter again and ask the government, what do we do? And the more quietly it is done, the better it would be for the process. Because whatever majority Prime Minister Manmohan Singh may have, difficulties can be created. I would like you to recall that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi has the largest majority in parliament ever in history. And when he came to Pakistan, I was again, unfortunately or fortunately, on the scene. I was Joint Secretary of the Ministry at that time. The talks that they had, if you look at the joint, this was in July 1989. In July 1989, in June 1989, the two defense secretaries had met on Siachen and had agreed to a formula to withdraw from Siachen. If you look at that joint statement, paragraph, I think 9 and 10 or 8 or 9, I'm not, of that joint 2 paragraphs were devoted appreciating the meeting of the defense secretaries and asking the 2 defense secretaries to work out quickly the modalities of withdrawal from Siachen at the prime ministerial level. And your military objected to it, and that agreement since '89 has not been implemented till today. Had that agreement been implemented, it would have paved the way to move forward in many other areas. And I personally feel very, very upset about that, because I was very intimately involved with the whole process, and I thought it was done. It was a done thing. So these are things, that is where the whole thing becomes extremely accident prone, and the two sides have to sit down and decide how do we proceed. That such kind of things, agreements, at least agreements that we make, should be implemented, because it's a difficult process. So those little mercies that come our way, we should try to strengthen them and expand them, and I think that is the way we should move forward. For example, apart from the composite dialogue process, which is now history, and probably whenever we start a new format would be invented, we also have a Pakistan-India Joint Commission, which earlier used to have four sub-commissions, but then in 2005 we had a meeting. Mr. Natwar Singh was foreign minister and he came to Pakistan, and we scrapped those 4 sub-commissions and instead had 8 working groups. And that entire thing covered education, cooperation in science and technology, tourism, cultural relations, all kinds of non-controversial things that could be achieved. That Joint Commission never meets. It was supposed to meet regularly, every 2 years or something like that. It hasn't met, I think, since 2007 or so. So even that avenue, and it was headed by the foreign ministers. So there are many good areas where we can start the cooperation process. But if you put the condition that terrorism and talks can't go together, you are justified in that. We will have to respect that. We will have to say that, all right. But at the same time, I personally feel, and particularly now looking back, and I have the hindsight, as they say, is 2020. I mean, I personally feel that it will not be productive at all. It will not take us anywhere. You can act tough, good enough. The borders remain closed. Doesn't matter. Pakistan is not getting isolated. Pakistan has a lot of friends. It has a lot of its importance. It's in its own right, and so on. Things will go on. Same, India is developing fast. Economy is doing very well. Your political system, and particularly the elections, have shown very stable and strong government. So you will progress. But I think it is in the interest of the two countries to somehow sit down and say that I mean, look at South Asia. I mean, it has the best wherewithal of cooperation with each other. If you look at South Asia, I mean, I may sound a little romantic, but it's one geographical unit, it's one ecological unit, and particularly in these present circumstances of climate change and all that, there's a need for us to all the South Asian states. We need to cooperate on climate change issues. We have need to cooperate on agricultural issues. There are so many things where we can benefit from each other's cooperating in agriculture. I mean, despite all the suspension of dialogue process and all that, the Arid Agriculture University in Rawalpindi is quietly cooperating with Punjab University in Patiala, I think Patiala or somewhere, and they are exchanging their research data on arid agriculture. Their scientists quietly go there.
Don't say too loudly.
they quietly go there and talk to them, and they send their data to each other. I mean, these are cooperations that can vary, and they'll work for the benefit of the two countries. I mean, people talk about economic union.
Right.
This subcontinent was an economic union under the British, with a common currency even. The things unraveled after independence. Why can't it revert to the same situation? But for that, we will have to have a certain broader vision and a broader heart to move forward.
The India-China relationship in some ways gives us a template to move the Pakistan-India relationship forward, insofar as the leaders of both countries took a decision 25 years ago that we will reach agreement on how to maintain peace and tranquility along the border, but we will not allow the lack of settlement of the boundary to come in the way of the flowering of the bilateral relationship across every other sphere. And if you take a look at India-China relations since the border peace and tranquility agreement, there's really been a blossoming of the relationship on in every direction: trade, people-to-people exchange. I would say even military-to-military contact between India and China, despite momentary ups and downs, is at a much higher level than what it was 25 years ago. Could this be a model that India and Pakistan could look at? That we say, fine, Kashmir remains an issue that we need to resolve. Siachen is an issue that requires a great deal of confidence between the two countries, but it's there to be resolved. Sir Creek is also there. The problem of terror looms large. Is there the possibility of the two sides reaching, a modicum of understanding on making sure that red lines of either side are not crossed, and then you proceed with, as you say, on the trade front, exchange of on the ecological, environmental front? Surely the India-China relationship is an excellent template for these two countries to follow.
Actually, we did better than that. I mean, I won't follow India-China template because we had a template which was far advanced than India-China template. We decided on the 25th of November 2003 that total peace on LOC and no firing. And for 5-6 years, there was no exchange of fire at all. How did it happen? We have to go back to that. Number two, we decided that Kashmir is not simply a border issue or a boundary issue. It's an issue much deeper than that. We started a mechanism of resolving that
This is
issue.
the back channel.
That back, what is known as Musharraf formula or so on, but it's a formula which has been discussed in many forums, and earlier also people have written on it. We had started off on a step-by-step approach that, all right, what steps can be taken to give comfort to the Kashmiri people, to cool down things, that there should be no exchange of fire across the LOC, and let things move forward, and look at the progress we made. I mean, the two bus services were opened, several border crossing areas were opened, trade across LOC trade started functioning despite all the difficulties. There was total peace and quiet in Kashmir, Indian held Kashmir, and
these were agreements negotiated on the front channel.
You see, back channel were just creating an understanding.
Yeah.
Back channel was not going to enter into a secret agreement. This is a total, I mean, in Pakistan particularly, there's misperception about it, that probably secretly they would try to reach an agreement and then fling it in the face of the nation. No, it was not. It was just quietly to reach an understanding, because otherwise if you start talking about difficult issues and start giving statements about it, then that whole thing goes by the things. So you just try to reach an understanding, and then after you have reached that understanding, you announce. I mean, for example, the bus service between Srinagar and Muzaffarabad, it was negotiated by a track to effort, in the sense that the permit system, officially we had agreed that, all right, we should have this kind of a bus service, but then there were difficulties. You wanted passports, we didn't wanted passports, and finally, if you recall, what was it called, that dialogue, Nimrana dialogue people, they met and they worked out a paper that this would be the paper, and that paper is working. Yeah. So if there is your intention to move forward, you can find a way, and that is, I think, what Pakistan and India need to do, is to find that way. Okay. And I think, and to be very honestly telling you, that you have wasted the past 8-10 years, in the sense that the goodwill that is in Pakistan today across the board about improving relations, I have never seen that kind of a thing anywhere, even where you call the establishment circles and so on, when one has discussions with them, one has talks with them, even there is no opposition and objection to improving relations with India, so long as it is in just an equitable manner.
Before I open the floor to questions and comments, and I should also say that if anybody is watching on YouTube and has questions, you can post them on our YouTube page, and we will try to ask them of Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan Sahab. But my question to you before I hand things over to the audience or involve the audience is, it seems at one level overly ambitious to speak of the Musharraf-Manmohan formula and that entire period, because it seems like so far in the past, and the terrain seems to have shifted so dramatically over the last 7 or 8 years, that it seems more important just to start talking again. But the question that I have, and that many Indians have, is the degree of buy-in within Pakistan to that Manmohan-Musharraf formula. Now, most rational observers of the bilateral relationship will tell you that yes, that formula, which is based on essentially territorial status quo, but creating this idea of soft borders and facilitating interaction between Kashmiris on both sides, is the most viable, perhaps the only viable way to move forward. But within Pakistan, I've met through the Track 2 process politicians from PPP and from Nawaz, from the PML, that say, no, that was Musharraf's own freelance activity. We don't support it. And I dare say, without betraying any confidence of the Chow Fryer confidentiality, that I've met retired Pakistani military officers who also say that, well, that was Musharraf's own, it was his own project, and there was no buy-in even in the military. So what is your assessment about the possibility of that formula coming back on the table with the full backing of Pakistani stakeholders? If the bilateral relationship were to improve, can we expect that formula would have the support of the Pakistani military, Pakistani politicians, Pakistani public opinion?
See, number one, why things became difficult. First, calling it a formula. shouldn't have been called a formula. Number one. Number two, giving an impression, at least in the media and the public discourse and public discussion, as if a secret final settlement was being negotiated, which would have been inflicted on the nation. That was not the case. The idea was, just like the bus service or just like the cross LOC trade, a wider spectrum of several CBMs put together as a CBM. The Musharraf formula was a broad-based, larger CBM for 10 or 15 or 20 year period, whatever period the two sides agree to, that all right, this will happen, and this probably will create an environment between the two sides where the final settlement of the Kashmir issue, without prejudice to the official positions of either side, Pakistan's position about UN resolutions and your position about a two-tongue and so on, that we will get to that later. And in 10 years or 15 years, the world would change as it is. The definitions of sovereignty is changing, the borders are changing, the economic integration, the internet revolution, the social media, it's a totally different world. What this world would be like 10 or 15 years from now, we can only guess. But the idea was that adopt something, a wider range of CBMs for 10 to 15 years, which would allow comfort among the Kashmiris, which would allow this violence that is going on, diminished violence or eliminate completely violence in Kashmiris, eliminate presence of security forces, because wherever strong presence of security forces is there, human rights violations take place, whether it is India, Pakistan, any country in the world. So all that, the idea was not a final settlement. People have an impression as if Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and President Musharraf were going to reach a secret agreement and sign it. And I used to tell some colleagues who used to, even colleagues who discuss in our dialogue and so on, that even if a dictator could do it in Pakistan, the Indian Prime Minister cannot go above his parliament and reach an agreement. He'll have to present it to the people. And the same thing was in Pakistan. Musharraf had no intention of pushing something onto the people. The idea was a larger, broad-based thing. The whole thing got blown out of proportion because it started being discussed in the media. So long as those interlocutors were meeting quietly and not saying anything, and a lot of progress was achieved in that time. And I personally feel that once again, if the talks start quietly, without any fanfare, don't call it Musharraf formula, don't call it the thing that were previously settled, say, okay, let's sit together and say, can we find a new way out? Mr. Yashwant Sinha, along with some very senior people, has visited Kashmir and has given some report which has some excellent ideas. We can gain from those ideas also. And this is your own senior Indian people who understand the Kashmir problem. They have shown the way. Let us start talking about these things. We'll find a way.
We posed the question at the start of this roundtable about the prospects for engagement. We've spent a lot of time trying to understand the backstory to why we are in a situation where we aren't talking. But I have to say, as somebody who watches India-Pakistan relations closely, that, and I'm sure Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan would agree with me, that the current outlook is not very positive for any future or any immediate resumption of engagement or dialogue, for that matter. But we shouldn't forget that if you look at the last 10 years, whenever we appear to have hit rock bottom, the two leaders on both sides have shown an ability to act and to think and act boldly. So after the Lahore visit, which itself was bold, you had the Pokhran and Chagai tests. Sorry, you had Chagai and Pokhran tests, which made life difficult. Then you had Lahore, which suddenly confounded the world in terms of so-called nuclear flashpoint countries actually looking for ways to engage. That was followed by Kargil, and we had a lengthy period when it seemed as if the relationship would go into free fall. That was followed by Agra. Agra was a flop. You had the attack on Parliament, again a downturn, but then the 2003 ceasefire, the January 2004 side statement at the SAARC summit between Vajpayee and Musharraf, which set the ball rolling for a fairly lengthy period of engagement. So there's been times when things have looked bad, and there's been times when leaders have suddenly surprised us all with initiatives that we didn't think they were capable of taking. So even as the broad outlook remains somewhat bleak and somewhat pessimistic,
actually,
that isn't necessarily going to be the case always.
I would just like to add that the prospects are not very bright. But the atmosphere, as far as Pakistan is concerned, is extremely propitious to start the dialogue process. Now, whether it is done or not is for you to decide.
On that note, we'll have to end it there. I would like to invite all of you for light refreshments, tea and refreshments. And if you have any further questions that you want to ask Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan Sahab, you can do so over tea. My heartfelt thanks to you for taking part in this forum. Most of our interactions in the past have been in track 2, but it's been nice of you to come and speak publicly and take questions and participate in this public forum. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.